Healed from your spanking at poker last week?
Oh, that was not fun. That was not fun. J. Cal on tilt. But there was some good wine, and it was good to have you back.
J. Cal is a mouthy little guy for the last 18 months. While I was healing myself, I was not at the poker game. He was running over everybody verbally. And I showed up, and for the first 15 minutes, all I did was literally tear everybody a new one. Just randomly.
Destroyed.
I mean, just destroying everything. The DoorDash guy was destroyed. Everybody was in a puddle.
It was brutal. Yeah, but
and then J. Cal lost. When J. Cal loses, he shuts up. He clams up. He gets really quiet.
I get very frustrated with myself when I make bad plays. I don't get frustrated by randomness. I don't mind getting sucked out on. I know when I did something stupid. Try to get better. But speaking about doing stupid stuff, hey, how's the last year been for you?
Last year has really, I mean, honestly,
I'm being facetious, but there's been a lot of changes.
It has been the most incredible year of my life. Yeah, the last 18 months has probably been the most profound 18 months of my life.
Well, let's get into it a bit. I remember you were here a couple years ago, and obviously you've spoken at our events, been on the pod a whole bunch of times. You're one of the highest rated speakers we've ever had because you're always very candid. You're also very ambitious. And I watched Social Capital go from being what I would call the classic Series A and seed stage fund. And then you added an IPOA, and then you added a growth fund and a hedge fund, and this grand vision started to emerge. And now it seems like you've deprecated all that and gotten back to the roots. What happened? Why? How did you wind up here?
Well, it was a lot of me just trying to figure out who I was as a person and trying to just have confidence in myself and not be so completely insecure. And a lot of my success was always rooted in this massive inferiority complex that I had. Not white, not rich, not well educated, blah, 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 blah. You know, you pack on all this baggage over so many years, but it can be really instrumental in motivating you. And it was very motivating for me. And so it worked for a really long time. But then I started to fall for a lot of the trappings of what some of that had given me, meaning, you know, when I was in sort of years 6, 7, and 8 of Social Capital, I frankly got distracted. I started out with this mission of wanting to work on really important companies and ideas and work with founders for, you know, decades. And I thought that's what would be necessary to really solve some important problems in the world. And so in order to do that, I thought, well, let me put in a lot of my own money and then I'll establish control. And all of that was true, but I still fell for it. Next thing you know, I was flying around London, Paris, New York, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, and you're meeting with all these people that you think are important. And as with a lot of things, what happens in mythology is when you get close to the myth, it disintegrates and you realize that there's really not much there. And that oftentimes the emperor has no clothes. Like think about all of the entrepreneurs you aspire to meet that you think are exceptional. I probably know all of them. You would probably, and I, if we rated 1 to 10, would give them very different scores. Because they're just normal people. And they have the same weaknesses and, you know, faults and trappings that we all do. And so in any event, the point is, I got to a place where I was like, nothing is working for me, meaning I was richer than I had ever been or more well-known or more notoriety, and I was thoroughly unhappy.
And you got the NBA team, or a piece of it, a big piece of it, the Warriors, that won multiple championships, and that was mind-blowing for both of us to hang out at Warrior games or...
take them to Vegas.
Yeah, have fun, and it was kind of mind-blowing, but at the end of the day... You kind of drifted away from what you were good at?
I was not happy. I mean, well, at the core of it, I was just fundamentally not happy. And so how does it manifest? It manifests in the following ways. One, I was very emotionally unavailable to my family. I was unemotional to my friends, unavailable. I was basically absent, building a business that I didn't want to be building, meaning constantly on the road, constantly on a plane, beating up my body, beating up my mind. And it took me in these last 18 months the courage to just say enough. And basically what it was me seeking out my own therapy. And all of a sudden I realized there is so much baggage that relates to the trauma that I had when I was a kid. And I had always talked about it, but I'd never really dealt with it, you know? And there's something, and I would just put a very fine point on it, which is a lot of us deal with baggage and trauma as from our childhood In my specific case, what it left was a deep gaping hole where I felt completely unworthy and not whole. Boom, that's the end. There's a lot of stuff that comes up to it, but that's the takeaway. That's the punchline. Immigrant family, alcoholic father, abusive psychologically and physically. And all of us have versions of all of this trauma. The point is that I felt zero sense of worth. And so I chased everybody else's definition of what worthy and successful should mean. And I did a good fucking job about it too.
Yeah, you were faking it pretty good there for a while.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, I could dunk with the best of them. I mean, truly. But it was not making me happy. And it took me into my early 40s to say, what is going to change this sort of lingering, burning sensation in my stomach? And so I just went off to fix these things. And so it caused a ton of dramatic change, both personally in my life and professionally in my life. And professionally, the most important thing is I said, I'm building somebody else's company. And I'm sure all of you guys, founders, have felt that moment where it's like, am I building the thing that I want, or am I building the thing that somebody else wants? Well, these investors will tell you they'll give me money if you do this, and this. Some of it feels core. Some of it doesn't feel core. Well, guess what happens when somebody tells you, Chamath, I'll give you $5 billion. You just need to do this, and this. And I'm like, I don't need your $5 billion. But then my partner's like, no, we want theirs too, and yours. And if you don't do it, we will quit, or this and that. And all of a sudden it's like, the business of being in a business takes over, and then you forget what you were there for in the first place. Mission goes out the door, values go out the door, the way in which you made decisions go out the door, your risk tolerance changes. Again, I think what I went through, a lot of founders go through. And there have to be these moments where you basically circle the wagons and say, enough's enough, or you capitulate. And that was my choice. I had to either capitulate, or I had to basically rip it all down, and I chose to rip it all down.
This week, I have spent at least 10 hours cleaning up legal messes at startups I'm investing in. In one case, the founders didn't have vesting schedules, and one of the founders left the company. So now this 40% of the company is owned by a founder who doesn't even work there and only worked there for 6 months. In other cases, people use the wrong corporate structure. They were LLCs, which then prevents them from ever getting venture capital. In other cases, they were registered in a foreign country and couldn't get investors in America. In other cases, they didn't even have non-disclosures and non-solicitation. So an employee left one of my startups and took 3 people with them because they didn't have a non-solicitation. All of these legal errors would have easily been caught by my friend Scott Walker at the Walker Corporate Law Group. They are a boutique law firm, and you've heard me talk about the Walker Corporate Law Group here on This Week in Startups many times. Well, they are focused on entrepreneurs and startups only. This is what they do at Walker Corporate Law, and they encouraged fixed fees. In other words, they tell you what they're going to charge you for a service. So you don't have to sit there with that anxiety waiting to open that PDF and seeing some huge bill. Nope. You know up front what it's going to cost to do those mergers and acquisitions, licensing agreements, start your company, employee stock option plans, terms of service, privacy policies. All these things have to be done right, and they will cost 10 times as much to fix, because I'm literally doing that. Before I invest in a company, I give them a list. You have to fix the vesting schedule. You've got to get the company incorporated properly. You've got to get the IP assignment done. I'm literally doing cleanup work that Scott Walker would have solved for these companies had they used him as their attorney. So give him a call, 415-979-9998. You've heard me say that number before, 415-979-9998. Or email Scott directly, scott@walkercorporatelaw.com, scott@walkercorporatelaw.com, or visit walkercorporatelaw.com. You really have to get focused on these things. Have the right corporate structure, have the right cap table, have the right vesting schedule, IP assignments. If your company is worth doing, it's worth doing correctly. Get your legal stuff dialed in so that you don't have red flags popping up. And we literally had a meeting before this podcast where I was sitting with one of my people who went through some diligence, and there were like 7 issues that needed to be fixed. And we got to the end and said, you know what? Is this a sign that the CEO doesn't know what they're doing? Is this too many red flags for us to invest? Well, I'm telling you candidly, if you have too many of these red flags come up during due diligence, you could lose quality investors. So go talk to Scott Walker. He's a great guy. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode.
And
Well, thank you for sharing, number one. I think it's really honest sort of assessment. I think, sure. It's fascinating to me because we knew each other before you were at Facebook, before you had money, and you were at AOL. I was just sold my company there, and we were just two dorky kids trying to, and probably shared a lot of DNA. Both of us, didn't have ideal childhoods. Both of us just trying to make it their way in the world. And then you got to this point where you felt like, I'm not happy anymore, and why am I trying to impress these other people? What's the core of that? Why were you trying to be part of this like big, grand hedge fund world? Because you were so good at it. You went to what's that conference in New York where you picked?
Irisone. No, I was.
You were on the stage at the.
I was the best. We were running. I was running until we shut it down. Top 2% hedge fund in the world, and I was doing it an hour a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was an enormous amount of money, but I literally spent an hour a week doing that job, and it was a top 2% hedge fund.
Right. And you're invited to speak at the hedge fund of hedge fund conference.
And it's intoxicating because you're speaking, and I spoke about Box, and they show a little ticker, and Box literally rips up, and it's up like 50% from where it was. And you think, look at the positive impact I had on all these employees just by opening my mouth and blathering on.
Yeah.
It's a very intoxicating thing. But at the core of it is why? Because everybody wants to feel validated. And in the absence of being able to validate oneself from within, you will seek others to validate you. And what's dangerous about the world that we live in, which is entrepreneurship and technology, is that it is so in the bullseye of everybody else now. Everybody wants to be in it, around it, on top of it, under it, associated with it, funding it, being a part of it, employed by it, all of it is true. And so it's a very intoxicating, shiny object that people want to have around them. And so they will use whatever devices that they have to co-opt that. And in my case, it was a very practical equation, which is these governments, these pension funds, these family offices, these very famous, important people have all this money. They're like, Chamath, come here, blah, blah, blah. And you start to fall for it. And I fell for it. And I fell for it for a long time. And then eventually, again, the mythology starts to wane. And you realize, again, I'm sure you guys had this. Oh, this investor who I let into my cap table, who I thought was going to solve all my problems, turns out he's just as fucking stupid as I am. And it turns out, wait a minute, if I don't solve this problem, no one's going to solve this problem. Oh, wait a minute, this person that I hired on my team who was supposed to solve all my problems, not so much. If I don't help solve it, it's not going to get solved. It all goes back to this fundamental belief in oneself. And it was much easier for me to have that in small doses, in small things. Very difficult for me to have it in big doses in the things that mattered, until I went back and I fixed the core toolbox that I used to build myself up in the morning. And that took a long time.
And now what is social capital? The partnership's been dropped.
It will be what it always has been. I think look, when I read articles and you see all the negative press, and it was so weird because I'm about to publish our annual investor letter, and I'll just preview it to you for a second. Our returns are bananas, okay? I've made more in the last 8 years compared to the S&P than Buffett did in the first 8 years of Berkshire. Buffett did 1,000 points of alpha. I did 1,800 points of alpha. My returns are double Buffett's. And that's that's not including Bitcoin, Amazon, and the Warriors, which I did off balance sheet in my own money. So there was nothing to numerically complain about. The job that we were doing. But I was so empty because I was like, we're not doing the job that we were supposed to be doing.
Which was investing in healthcare, education.
Not even in investing. The point is you need to be there to basically take a stand on issues. And I have the bully pulpit to do it. We had the capital to do it, but we weren't doing it in as much of a way that we should have been. Climate change still ripping away unabated. What is anybody doing about it? Education is eroding at the seams. What is anybody really doing about it? Drug costs through the ceiling. The United States healthcare system worse and worse and worse every year, even though we spend more and more and more. What is anybody really doing about it? And the answer is not as much as it needs to be done.
Yeah. And certainly not as much.
And so that's not a conversation of investing or IRRs or blah, blah, blahs. It's about ideas, and it's about people, and it's about drawing a line in the sand and doing things. And I was good at that for a while, and then I stopped focusing on it. And so what we are today is an attempt to get back to where we started and what we should have always been, which is really interesting ways of solving very difficult problems that, if they are solved, matter in the world. A very long-term byproduct of that will be more capital. I suspect enormous amounts, way more than a traditional investing job will do. But that's a byproduct, because when you measure and quantify the absolute value of progress, it's way more enormous than measuring the absolute value of discounted cash flows. And that's what people don't get. And they get lost in all of this stuff. And particularly now, when tech is so hot and so interesting and blah, 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 it's easy to lose sight of what's really important. So we are permanent capital, starting with $2 billion of my own money. We are investing as much as we need for as long as we want in the things that are important. And what's great about that is that there's no LPs. There's no decision-making that isn't just about a group of us that are very technical and product-oriented, can ask and answer extremely important technical questions. And then we have an entire network of people around us that is wholly different than what they were. Partnerships with the Salk Institute, partnerships with MIT, partnerships with Xerox PARC, partnerships with 40 postdocs, doing all kinds of really interesting research in the world so we can learn from these folks who are really on the ground, selflessly trying to solve important issues in the world. And when we can translate, when we can learn, then we can go off and do interesting things. And those companies now, Jason, that we really started in Fund 1 are doing exceptionally well. I used to do this thing every quarter where I would ask the team, hey guys, tell me all of our companies what you think the exits will be. And I always used it for two reasons. One, to validate that whatever they thought was going to happen wasn't. And two, was who was obvious and should be fired first. Because it's very easy for some numbskull to basically say, oh, well, this one with the most revenue is worth the most money, right? That's easy. But how hard is it for someone to actually project forward what the real value of a market and a business should be, and how things should be changed and manipulated and morphed to max value? And I find that there were a few people who were consistently really good at it. They're still here. And so I'm happy to be around folks that can actually see the forest from the trees this way. Like, I remember we put in a few $1 million around this idea of small-scale satellites. And this entrepreneur, she was superb, and she could not get a meeting. And what's so lucky for us is we met her after an entire, fakakta process where all the traditional folks were like, no. And we gave her what she needed, et cetera, et cetera. And she is literally off to the races, off to space, launching an entire constellation that'll basically become like an alternative low-cost version of the internet. Mega huge, multi-trillion-dollar, close to trillion-dollar companies talk about it. They blather on about it. They do fucking keynotes about it. She's done it. And she's done it with $3 million. That's bananas.
Yeah.
And so I need to be around people like her.
I am obsessed with email. You know this because I'm probably emailing you now about the podcast. We have a This Week in Startups podcast list, and we send all of our listeners updates on the podcast. Who's been on the show, maybe a live episode's coming up, live stream is firing off. And we constantly get new people finding out about our podcast. And so we use Campaign Monitor, which is an easy-to-use email marketing platform. And it comes with incredible templates, and it's got a drag and drop editor, which I'm about to show you here, as well as 24/7 customer support and over 250,000 businesses using them all over the world. But it's so quick to set up something called email automation. What is email automation? This is one of the greatest tools you can add to your startup or business's success. And in the example I'm going to show you, we set up an automation. I'll hit play here and I'll sportscast. And you see us putting in the logo and putting in some spacing, adding images. And we're telling you about all the different episodes on This Week in Startups. We're seeing a preview on an iPhone. And also, we say, hey, if somebody signs up for the list, wait 15 minutes and then send them this best of email with shows that we've done in the past. And then it says, wait 3 days. and then send them another best of show. In other words, if you sign up for our mailing list and you just found out about This Week in Startups, we can set this drip campaign to give you drip, 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 a couple of emails letting you know about our events, about past episodes. And people love this kind of stuff. It re-engages people. It's not enough to just collect the email. You have to think about the emails you're sending to people. You have to make them look beautiful. You have to have a clear call to action. And here is your clear call to action right now. I want you to try Campaign Monitor for free at campaignmonitor.com/twist. Listeners who sign up and become a customer will receive a free t-shirt. You can really change the course of your business by using campaignmonitor.com. I love the product. My team loves the product. And let me tell you something. Doing this automation used to be something that you had to work with a developer to do. That's why so few companies did it. Now Campaign Monitor has made it quick and easy, and they have a huge library of examples. So go there right now, campaignmonitor.com/twist. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. The hype has gotten a little bit out of control.
It's out of control.
Yeah.
It's out of control.
What do you think the end is? What is the end game here?
Well, we are, make no mistake, well, you are, I'm out, because I sold, but you guys are in the middle of an enormous multivariate kind of Ponzi scheme. And so let me explain that to you because it's important for you to understand. You get courted by investors, okay? These are not people writing checks out of their own balance sheet. They're doing a job with other people's money. And for that, they get one thing that's obvious, which is a yearly fee. And then something that's non-obvious, which is a part of the gains if what you do works. Okay, right? Everybody understands that? That's how a fund that invests in you works. That fund is getting paid fees every year and then carry at the back end if it works. Okay? They come to you. They're like, we want to partner with you. You're the best. We're going to help. You're so awesome. Have a fleece vest. It has our logo on it. You know, we backed blah, blah, blah company. You know, right? That's
Sure.
the whole, that's the basic, that's the pitch. So you say yes. And then they give you, I'm just going to make up a number, $1 million. Then you go to your first board meeting. How fast are you growing? How many of you have had these discussions? How fast are you growing? Okay, grow faster. How many of you have had that discussion? Grow faster. Okay, most of you that raised your hand. Well, it would probably shock you to know that almost 40 cents of every venture dollar right now goes right back into the hands of Google, Facebook, and Amazon. What do you think is happening there? You think that's all profitable growth? No. That's there to fund your superficial growth. Just because the entrepreneur or the VC gives you $1 million and tells you to grow faster, do you have better product market fit in that moment? No. You're doing what you're told to do, which is to take their money and make the company grow, superficially grow. Then what do? They turn around to their buddies and say, look at this thing, it's growing. You should do the B. And then they come into a board meeting, they're like, guys, I think we should raise a B. How many times, I mean, you may not be late enough in that stage, but you've gone through this, Jason. I mean, you went through it with the best of them, Sequoia. No comment.
Great firm.
Fantastic firm. Great people.
Tremendous.
Tremendous.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in my swim lane.
Right in the list. Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. I know you're burning it all down. Just don't burn down my house in the process, okay? I'm still building my house. I know you. Woo. Trying to keep up here. It's not easy being in the passenger seat this time. This thing have airbags?
Okay, so anyways, so then they're like, hey, you should raise a B. And some different firm, of which they're all buddies, do the B, mark it up 4 or 5x. Now what's happened? Fund A, their returns look genius. Now it's all on paper, but it looks amazing, right? Fund B comes into the board meeting now. Hey, how fast are you growing? You got to grow faster. Okay, now 40 cents of every dollar there goes into Facebook and Google and Amazon, right? And you're buying even more unprofitable growth. It's not even clear that those LTVs and those CACs make any sense. Doesn't matter. You've been told to grow. So you're growing. You're doing your job. Did your product market fit actually change in that moment? Probably not. But you continue to pump money into those things. And then the Series B investor says, we should raise a Series C. We're running out of money. Well, of course you are, because 40 cents of every dollar just went back into the hands of Facebook, Google, and Amazon. They introduce it to another buddy. That buddy is like, yeah, this looks great. Boom, fire the money in. Now, A has an even better markup. B has a markup. C has a basis and is like, hey, how fast are you growing? Maybe you should grow faster. Okay? Now, meanwhile, somewhere between the B and the C round, the guy who runs Fund A is like, I should raise a second fund. I'm pretty good at this. And goes to a bunch of investors and says, look at my IRR. They're amazing. Isn't this amazing? And the investor's like, yeah, this is amazing. Here's more money. And then now he or she goes and finds another batch and starts the process again. And then somewhere between the C and the D, the B guys are like, I'm pretty good at this. This is easier than I should raise a second fund. Maybe I'll make it a slightly bigger fund. I should be doing bigger checks. Raises a B, right? Raises Fund 2. Finds Fund A's batch of second companies and says, hey, let's work together again. We are good at this together. On and on down the line. This is what's happening now. So when you wake up every day and you read a newsletter and you notice that umpteen companies are getting funded for every single idea, and then that the quantum of dollars are going up, and that all of a sudden you're reading about investors you've never, ever heard of. That is what something like this looks like played out in real life. So you have the cream of the crop who will still do a good job, but who now have to raise larger and larger funds. They own less and less of the companies. The returns are not as good. And then you have everybody else who's chasing, and playing this sort of hot potato game, hoping to raise a fund. And then a second fund, and then a third fund. And then the biggest thing happens, which is that whole industry that services you guys, theoretically services you guys, are no longer about your success, because your success is about their carry, and they couldn't give a fuck. They care about fees, right? And it's not very difficult to get out a Google spreadsheet and figure out at how many dollars, right, does 2% of those dollars divided by the 5 or 6 partners at that firm are greater than their share of profits for you at some number of exits. And then you wonder why they're more concerned about how much money you're spending on Facebook, Google, and Amazon.
So if somebody builds up 5 or 6 of these $500 million funds, they get to 2, 3, 4 billion.
Much less, Jason.
Yeah.
I mean, if you even have 500 million under management and you're collecting 2% a year, it's $10 million. You know, it's let's just say there's 4 or 5 partners. You're making $1 million a year over 10 years. Think of how much you've made.
10 million.
And think of how much the fund has to be. I mean, you look stupid, but you are not stupid. But think of how much money the fund would have to be, net of expenses, net of all of this stuff for you to pay back. It's super complicated math.
Yeah.
And so my point is, the incentives in this industry are the most out of whack they've ever been. It's a bit of a charade. So my point is, I looked at our portfolio. We have some incredible businesses. We have things that are really meaningful in the world. We have both. And I'm like, it's time to take my chips off the table. Sorry, ciao. So, and I would rather sit there and wait with an enormous balance sheet of capital, find the really, really good companies that need the money, and then also wait for some of this air to get out of the balloon. Find a point where the charade gets exposed.
Hey, let me take a moment to thank our friends at LinkedIn. When you advertise on LinkedIn, which is the world's largest professional network, you have the opportunity to build long-term relationships with critically important customers. And these translate into high-quality leads, web traffic, and higher brand awareness. But the first step is to find and target the right audience every day. 500 million professionals engage with content on LinkedIn. 500 million people. And your future customers are among them. You know this because you're on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has marketing tools that will help you target these customers with precision down to their job title, company, and industry. So if you wanted to target people in the scooter business or who work at Uber or Lyft or in transportation or in government, you could pick their job title, their company, and their industry. And this will let you create a great message that customers care about. In fact, 4 out of 5 customers on LinkedIn are decision makers at their company. You know this because you're on LinkedIn and you're a decision maker and you're listening to This Week in Startups. So get on there, use LinkedIn marketing, and build these really important relationships. And here is a ridiculous, unbelievable, absurdly generous call to action. Get $100, a C note, from your boy Jason by going to LinkedIn.com. Try to keep it together, people. LinkedIn.com/thisweekinstartups. Now you got to type out all those characters. LinkedIn.com/thisweekinstartups. The podcast you're listening to. And if you type in those characters, you get about $10 per character, $100 in ad credits. Terms and conditions apply. Like don't run a scam. But for everybody else who's not running scams, go to LinkedIn.com/thisweekinstartups and grab the C note, a hundy from your boy. All right. Thanks again, LinkedIn.
It feels like it's a little bit bubbly, but great companies are coming out of this. Some of them are the ones you've invested in, Slack, Intercom.
That's what I'm saying. I think we are very fortunate to be in a bunch of companies that are going to be iconic legacy businesses. What I'm saying is the next, $250 million check I want to write, I'm more likely to just buy a company outright or give that $250 million to a company that isn't looking to raise it, but rather is like their last post was at 20 million and say, hey, listen, what you're doing is really kick-ass. It's probably going to take 25 years. Here's 250 million based on these milestones. Check in with me when you need the extra money. Because quite honestly, I think that's a healthier way. I think you'll be more impactful. And I think, again, for me, I will not be a part of this charade anymore. I don't know. And I think the charade is dangerous. And it's particularly dangerous to these companies. It's very, very dangerous to you as founders. Because again, at some point, the whole grow, grow, grow at all costs runs out of juice. You can no longer acquire at a certain point profitably in Google, Facebook, and Amazon, right? Your LTVs will get out of whack, right? Your gross margin positivity, all of a sudden, to gross margin negativity. I mean, forget about net profitability. These are fundamentally broken business concepts. They don't work. They only work if the money never stops. But the money never stops until as much time as people can raise new funds. And that's predicated on people marking up old deals. You see how this whole thing, at no point is there anything that comes back to you, the entrepreneur, that says, what's your true core product market fit and is it working? It's not part of the conversation. That is extremely dangerous. So I can't prognosticate and pick a time. That's not the point. But I think the point is that there has to be much more sobriety in terms of how companies grow. And, I've now thought to myself, my gosh, I would love to grow and find a business that can be there growing 20 to 25% a year for the next 15 years. That violates all the mechanics and all the gymnastics within a venture fund. It's like grow at 400 because we know 400 eventually decays to 12% a year. But they don't care by the time you're growing at 12% a year because by the time 400 became 200, became 100, became 50, they've raised 2 more funds, they've marked up the rest of their deals, they've made their fees. Ciao. So
how does a founder protect against investors?
Grow slow.
Okay.
Grow real, grow slow.
Grow real, grow slow.
Jeff Bezos grew Amazon. And I mean, this is what's so bananas. None of us go back and look at the people we really want to be like. I'd like to be like that guy. He's in his 50s. He's ripped. He's rich as fuck. And he's a genius.
Yeah.
Okay? That guy basically grew at 25% a year for fucking 25 years. I'm sorry, but that's drop the mic level stuff there. That's not 400, 8%. I don't know what's going on. You can't come out of the gate too fast. And I've learned that the hard way. So that's one really important thing. I have a very simple thing that I draw on the box now to my team. I'm like, here's a 2x2 matrix. Draw it out if you want, okay? This x-axis is capital light, capital heavy, x-axis. The y-axis is obvious, non-obvious. Wherever you are, you want to be, whether you're obvious or non-obvious, you want to be in that capital light column. Think of where venture excels. Venture excels in obvious meets capital heavy. Look at scooters. It's not to make fun. Scooters is an exceptionally obvious business model, right? Well, you'd say, well, we had planes on charter 25 years ago through NetJets. We eventually had smaller planes on charter. Then we had buses on charter. Then we had limousines on charter. Then we had cars on charter. Then we had cheaper cars on charter. Then we were pooling cars. Then we had bicycles. I mean, you literally did not have to be as smart as you to take that trail of breadcrumbs and say, well, what's the quantum of transport that's smaller than a bicycle but greater than your feet?
Rollerblades.
Rollerblades.
Just littered all over San Francisco. Just
Right.
rollerblades everywhere.
Rollerblades.
Put your feet in. See what happens.
Yeah.
Could be anything in there.
Could be anything in there.
Needles.
Hypodermic needles,
Rats.
feces.
Anything. Human. Dog.
Yeah. You know, by the way, when you become mayor and fix this town, I'm going to move back here. That's my commitment to you.
I like it. MayorJason.com approves.
So basically, but think about that, right? But now think about how much money has gone into that category.
Billions.
And
hundreds of millions.
And the delta of time that those companies have existed, 18 months, 24 months. But again, obvious, capital heavy. Why? Because it pays off the charade. Get it in there, fire it in, buy some ads, blah, 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 grow so fast, get somebody else, put some more money in, fire some ads, buy some growth, blah, blah, blah. Jesus Christ. I mean, is that how great businesses get built? In my opinion, probably not. Then you have people like Elon, and he's like, well, I'm going to do the other thing, which is like capital heavy, non-obvious. And basically, unless you're as smart as he is, it's the dumbest thing to do.
Rocket ships.
Cars.
Electric
right?
cars. Power walls.
Then I would say there's the rest of us. And I would say non-obvious or obvious, you're not going to know a priori, but capital heavy, capital light, you can control. And I love this idea of things like, for example, we're incubating a company right now, which I just absolutely fundamentally love. It is in a non-obvious space that is extremely capital heavy. And our approach is basically unbelievably obvious to us because we come from the internet, and it's exceptionally capital light. Think about it as, it takes $2 billion to launch a product. And, that $2 billion, because of how much it costs, you need like 20,000 customers. And we go off and we find those 20,000 customers for $2,000. And we're like, $2 billion is spent to acquire these people? What? And so, but instead what we said was, let's just seed it with 50K. It's kind of working. Let's put in another 200K. It's kind of working. My point is, there's a level of discipline I've arrived at now in terms of the things that I think should be how I like companies to be built, because otherwise you're always going to be getting whipsawed by the fund dynamics, by what LPs are demanding of the GPs, by what GPs have issues with respect to compensation. And so there's a whole bunch of vagaries that have nothing to do with you. Well, I'm building a house in Atherton. I leased a fancy car. Yeah, I'll do your deal. Because I think it's growing fast enough where somebody else will mark up my deal. That'll allow me to raise a new fund, which will allow me to get the 2%, which will allow me to increase my compensation, which will pay for my car. I'm sorry, guys, but if you think that that's not what's happening, you're lying to yourself. You are lying to yourself.
Why are the LPs going along with this? I'm curious.
Well, some LPs are actually unbelievably superb. I'll publish this in my letter, but we looked at a composition of our LPs, and we're going to kind of expose this so people see. But 80% of them are family offices, and they're exceptional because they are like folks like us. They're kind of like grinders. Some of us got lucky, some didn't, then some got really lucky, and they're all pretty low key, and are they want to be around people like us, and it's wonderful.
They're builders. Roll up your sleeves.
They're
build
builders.
stuff. Yeah.
And then they value building, and they don't value all the high gloss veneer of service providers. You know, service providers are very intoxicating because they put a high gloss veneer of basically being a parasitic, blood-sucking piece of shit on a builder.
That's what I was going to say.
But anyway, service providers aside, what the fuck are we talking about? Oh yeah,
The LPs, the good ones.
endowments, kick ass. Foundations, kick ass. Just because, like you know, we have a couple of foundations who do a ton of stuff in medical research, and it's inspiring. We actually also, you know, worked with a couple of organizations that allowed the pensioners, because we were like, we knew we were going to make money. I've always known, and I'm like, I don't want to make money for other rich people, and I don't want to make money for like Harvard. Like, I want to make money for like pensioners who work in a nonprofit, because like they're like, yeah, I'm going to work at this hospital because I want to help people. And it's so anyway. So we have that, and then the thing that I made a mistake is, you know, at one point in time, I let my partners choose a few of the LPs. And, you know, they had a very different set of incentives than I did. And we ended up admitting a bunch of fund-to-funds. And some were okay, but there were a few that were just horrible, rotten people.
These are the people that have, in the press, anonymously trashed you?
I'm not sure. I don't know, because these are all.
assume.
Well, to be honest with you, Jason, if I had to really internalize, I think a bunch of my former partners said that as well. Like, at the end of the day, I was tricking myself and them. This was a benevolent dictatorship that I tried to pretend was a democracy. And I should have just owned that. And it's not to say that it's right or wrong, but I had the right to start a company the way I wanted, run my way on my terms. I have earned that right. And I should have just been more honest with everybody. Now, was I honest in the docs that everybody signed? Yes. Was I honest in when their lawyers, who I paid for, reviewed the things that said he has absolute control and can do whatever he wants whenever he wants? Was that honest? Yes. But at the end of the day, I was still like, guys, it's a community. You know, let's work together. It's nice. I like what you think. Yes. But then when push came to shove, big decisions, I was like, sorry, we're doing this. Sorry, we're not doing it.
Right.
And that's not for everybody. And it was for me. And yeah, so, you know, those guys really chafed at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the people that are sniping, at the end of the day, press is there to basically, you said this incredibly well, you know, it's about criticism. And criticism is two things. The positive way that I took criticism is, what did I do wrong and how do I make myself better as a human being? And the takeaway from there is, I made a lot of people feel very unworthy and unseen because of my style. And I have to be more coherent and honest with my style and allow people to choose whether to be around it or not, right? But the second part, which is less about me and more about them, is like, nobody remembers a critic.
No.
And at the end of the day, critics are there to basically amplify other people's frustration. So you can take the little bit of it that's positive, but otherwise you got to block it out. I mean, you guys are trying to build things. That's so hard. Nobody believes. It's so dark. You're all alone. Last thing you want is someone telling you that you can't do it. Like, fuck those people.
Especially if they're just doing it to get page views. It's like bottom feeders.
They're like anonymous, irrelevant losers on the sidelines. You're on the field doing things. Be proud. That's amazing. That's hard. That's hard.
Yeah,
Good for you.
Yeah. There's one critic in the history of critics who ever mattered. It was Roger Ebert. And the reason Roger Ebert was loved was because he was a fan of new directors, new projects, and he was just this tremendous supporter of the art of cinema. And it was...
And the other thing that you said before, which is true, like, criticism really matters when you're exposing, you know, deep structural faults in a system, investigative journalists, etc. That kind of criticism is important.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you're talking about sniping from the sidelines about how company A is screwed and company B is screwed, and oh my God, this person lost an executive and that person, and it's like, you know nothing about nothing because you're sitting there in your dark little room, toiling away, bitterly trying to be one of us, and you're not. That's what you're doing. And those people don't matter.
No, it's the people who make things that matter. Well, on that, I'm going to just deal with the fallout of this conversation for a little while.
Wait, what is the fallout of this conversation? This conversation was real.
Well, no, it was very real. I think it was very real. No, it's great because up until this moment, people were more worried about Elon than you, and now people are more worried about you than Elon, so that makes it... I'm joking. You know,
it's so funny, like, E and I will make it through. We are the nuclear cockroaches, he and I.
Exactly.
We will survive.
You will survive, absolutely.
Because you talk to him as well. He's like, everything's great. Both of us are like, everything's fantastic.
Like, cars are going up and to the right, and people are on social media saying how much they love the car. What else is there?
It's crazy.
It's like, the product is loved. It's the greatest car ever made, and people can't get enough of them.
No, we were both like, literally, like, it's like, why does everybody think things are so... And it's like, again, people want to validate page view clickbait, but it doesn't map to, like, what's really happening.
No, the reality is far different. All right, on that note, let's hear it for Chamath Palihapitiya.
Good luck, all you guys.
Yeah.